In case you missed it, there was news Tuesday out of the PGA Tour, an announcement of a pretty extensive slate of changes, proposed changes, we should say, that could impact field sizes and the number of exempt players. And those include reducing field sizes from the current 156 down to as low as 120, changing the exempt status so that only 100 in the FedEx Cup would receive cards as opposed to the current 125. There'd also be a reduction in Corn Ferry Tour graduates from 30 to 20, and the elimination of almost all of the regular season Monday qualifier tournaments. And with reaction to these potential changes that are going to be voted on in November, we welcome in for our roundtable our colleagues Todd Lewis and Brentley Romine. Todd, I want to start with you. These proposals came from the Player Advisory Council, which is a 16-man committee made up of both superstars and journeymen in the game. It's chaired by Camilo Villegas. You talked to Camilo this morning. What did he have to say?
Yeah, and he is a key component in this story. Not only is Camilo Villegas the chairman of the Player Advisory Council, he was voted on to that position by his peers, but also he is going to elevate, because of his position in 2025, in January of 2025, to be on the PGA Tour Policy Board. So he helped draft this memo and also will be voting on it next year. And I asked him to kind of break down the reasoning why this proposal was put out there. And he said there are a couple of reasons. Number one, and probably the biggest to him in my conversation, was what does a tour card mean for the players that graduate from the Corn Ferry Tour, graduate from Q School? They are not going to get a lot of starts, especially early in the PGA Tour season. They ran a lot of metrics, and they said the average start for those players are maybe 4 in the first 15 events. So they wanted to shrink the size from the Corn Ferry Tour from 30 to 20. Also, if you look at historically, the Corn Ferry Tour graduates in the Corn Ferry Tour standings positions 21 through 30, those players generally do not retain their card. And positions 101 through 125 in the FedEx Cup standings, they have a tough time retaining their card too. So that was in play. Secondly, excuse me, it became a big giant traffic jam in some events on the PGA Tour with these 156-man fields, players not being able to finish on Thursday and Friday. And so they decided to come together, they being the pack, to create this memo that is now out there. Now, I will say that Camilo Villegas, he won last year. He is exempt. He was exempt on the PGA Tour season this year and is exempt next year. But if this goes through, this could actually affect him. But he told me that despite being in my early 40s, and I'm a 5-time winner out here on the PGA Tour, and yes, I would love to have more playing opportunities, the game is more important. Let's streamline it. Let's make it better for the fans. Let's have play ending on the day it's supposed to. And that was very critical for the pack. Now, this is not just a shocking thing. This is something that's been talked about for maybe a couple of years now and trying to reduce the membership and reduce the tournament field size. So that's the main reasoning why they wanted to do this.
Todd, do you think that sentiment of Camilo's will be shared by a lot of other players? Because one thing we have seen in this game in the last few years is golfers tend to make fairly selfish decisions based on where they are in their careers at a certain point in time. So there are going to be a lot of guys out there who don't actually like this proposal.
Yeah, absolutely. And Camilo said he has gotten a lot of pushback from, we like to say, the rank and file players, the guys who aren't generally in the signature events. The bigger stars on the PGA Tour get most of those. So, yes, there has been some pushback. Here's an interesting note. Josh Teeter is a part of the Player Advisory Council as well. And Josh is fighting to keep his card on the PGA Tour. And I reached out to Josh because, again, he was in that room that helped put together this memo. And he said, yes, there are a lot of positives about this, but the Corn Ferry Tour now is going to have better players. He hopes that tour gets better purses, gets more money. He's a little concerned about how the sponsors of these full field events will be now, considering that they have fewer players. But one thing he said, too, is that the first 2 rounds of March Madness, he's a University of Kentucky fan. Let's take that into consideration. He said you have favorites winning and Cinderellas beating the Blue Bloods. That's what the average sports fan likes to see. And this doesn't give us the chance of that happening very often. And this is from a guy who was in the room that helped put this proposal together.
Now, Brentley, you have a story up on golfchannel.com right now where you talked to quite a few players really across the spectrum at each level. What are some of the concerns that you heard about this proposal?
Yeah, Rex. Well, the concern is that next year on the PGA Tour for the rookies, for the Korn Ferry Tour grads, the Q School grads, it's going to be an unprecedented year in terms of difficulty in keeping your card. And the reason I say that and the reason these players believe that is because let's go back to earlier this year. I was out at the Cognizant Classic talking to some of these Korn Ferry Tour grads that, as Todd mentioned, didn't get many starts. I talked to Rafa Campos, who had played something like 3 of the first 9 events. And when he does get the opportunity, he's playing for significantly fewer points. And he told me, quote, I don't feel a part of the PGA Tour. And so these players realize that when these changes go into effect in 2026, it's going to close that gap between the A schedule that the elites are playing and the B schedule. It's going to provide more meaning to that PGA Tour card. If you have a tour card, you're going to be able to play in every single open event, except for maybe the Waste Management Phoenix Open. So really the reaction from a lot of the rookies coming in next year, and keep in mind, they're all in Ponte Vedra right now for rookie orientation today, it was overly positive, and that surprised me a little bit. The only qualm was the reduction of the Monday qualifier spot. A lot of these guys have played in a lot of those Monday qualifiers. And, the tour has, leaned on some of those stories a bit as well. And we're going to see 7 fewer Monday qualifiers earlier in the season. 3 are going to go down to 2 spots. And then continuing to talk to some of these players, there was kind of a glass half full approach in that there was one interesting perspective that got brought up to me. And that was, yes, it's going to be a challenge next year. But for the 21 through 30, if these rules went into in place 1 year earlier, they wouldn't even be on the PGA Tour. So it's all about taking advantage of the opportunities that you get and keeping a positive mindset. Because if you start 2025 complaining and woe is me, you've already lost your card.
Todd, there's a lot of debate going on about a lot of these particular proposals. The Monday qualifier, I think, is an interesting one because I would argue that's something the Tour should lean into as part of the weekly narrative of life out there. This vote is November 18th. Do you see any of these proposals kind of being tweaked or potentially rejected by the policy board, or would you suggest it's more likely to be a kind of a rubber stamping of what the players want?
Yeah, I think anything could happen, sure. But from what I'm hearing and talking to Camila Magegas and other people that are involved in this memo and this proposal, I think it is generally going to get rubber stamped. I do want to follow up a couple other things that Camila Magegas told me too. He said by reducing the Korn Ferry Tour graduates from 30 to 20, those 20 will probably get close to 21, maybe even 21 to 22 starts in the season. That's significantly higher. So more playing opportunities for those guys. And for those who finish 101 through 125 in the FedEx Cup standings, they will have conditional status. And Camilla believes, again, they ran a lot of metrics, that those players will get somewhere between 15 and 17 starts. So it's not like these guys are getting completely shut out. So they are getting some starts. But I do think that this is, from what I'm hearing, again, anything can happen, that this is going to be positively approved by the Tour Policy Board.
I get the feeling these are changes we're going to be talking about for quite some time to come. Thanks for the time today, guys.